Hello all Royal Rangers, my name is Commander Matthew Kenslow and I'm over here in the United States of America, and I've been a Royal Ranger for 20 years and year number 7 as a commander. Thank you so much for checking out this video. The purpose of this video is to go over a merit. In these videos I'm going to walk through every one of the requirements. Now it's important to note that while watching these videos it will not give you the merit. You have to show to your commander that you have watched and learned from these videos. What I recommend you doing is taking down notes for each requirement and then show them to your commander for approval. Some of the purposes of Royal Rangers is to build knowledge, wisdom, skills, and leadership attributes while learning about God's Word and conserving His resources practically. And most importantly, to have fun doing it. So I'm Commander Matthew Kenslow from the United States of America, and be blessed.
Hi everybody, welcome to the President's Merit. Let's begin with requirement 1. List the qualifications to be President of the United States and the President's term of office. So number 1, what is this building right here? Well, this is the White House. I'm sure that you probably recognize it. It's 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. What's this building? Yep, that's the White House, just the other side of the White House. This is on the back of the $20 bill as it is today, and this is the back of the $20 bill as it was before Series 1996. Okay, so let me introduce you to Article 2 of the Constitution. The image that I use is from the actual Constitution. I like how they had written back then. But anyway, Article 2 deals with the executive branch, which is about the President of the United States. Article 1 deals with the legislative branch or Congress, and Article 3 deals with the judicial branch, the courts. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 1 says this: the executive power shall be vested in a President of the United States of America. He shall hold his office during the term of 4 years, and, together with a Vice President, chosen for the same term, be elected. So the first part of this clause, or paragraph, says that the executive power shall be vested in a president, and that the president will serve with the vice president for 4 years per term, and is elected. Now, the next clause or two deals with the Electoral College. It's been amended since 1787, which means modified, and that's completely a different lesson than this merit requires. So I invite you to do your own research. It's pretty interesting when you learn about the Electoral College. But let's skip down to Clause 5. It says, quote, no person except a natural born citizen or a citizen of the United States at the time of the adoption of this Constitution, which ended up being, well, let's say this, think about it as being passed on September 17th, 1787, but wasn't ratified or agreed upon until June 21st, 1788. Well, at least 9 of the colonies, and then the other 4, to make 13, ratified the Constitution later on. And that meant that the new Constitution will go into effect March 4th, 1789, which it did. But anyway, I just want to clarify that part. So again, no person except a natural born citizen or citizen of the United States at the time of the adoption of this Constitution shall be eligible to the office of President. Neither shall any person be eligible to that office who shall not have attained to the age of 35 years and been 14 years a resident within the United States. If you didn't catch all of that, I'll elucidate, but I don't know about you, but I liked how they talked back then. But just in case I kind of translated it for you. In other words, to be president, one must be a natural born citizen of the United States, be at least 35 years old, and been a resident within the United States for at least 14 years. Basically, that's what it says, and that's what you, or that's your qualifications to be president of the United States. Natural born citizen means that you're either born in the land of the country within the 50 states, as well as being born to natural-born citizens. So I personally remember the 2008 election. I was in middle school at the time, but I didn't really know this until years later, but the Republican candidate John McCain was actually born outside the land of the United States. He was born in Panama. However, his parents were natural-born citizens, so he could have qualified to be president had he won the November 4th, 2008 election, a date that I will never forget. Now let's think about this. He or she, because it doesn't specify that it has to be a man, he or she needs to be 35 years old and a resident for 14 years at least. So what does that mean? Well, let's say that you're a natural-born citizen and then you go live in another country and then come back. The total amount of time that you're living in the United States within our borders needs to total 14 years. So my question to you is, what are the qualifications to be vice president? Answer: the same exact qualifications to be president. You need to be at least 35 years old, a resident within the United States for at least 14 years, natural-born citizen. If you think about it, if something were to happen to the president, who takes over? Well, the vice president takes over. So naturally, he has to have, or she, the same exact qualifications to be president. And this has happened 9 times where the vice president has to take over, and we will get to that in the future requirement. Okay, Article 2, Section 1, Clause 8 talks about a very important thing for the incoming president, specifically at the inauguration. So here I have a picture of Ronald Reagan's first inauguration on January 20th, 1981. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 8 says, "Before he enter on the execution of his office, he shall take the following oath or affirmation. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States, and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States." It was George Washington on April 30th, 1789, who added "So help me God," and it's kind of been a tradition ever since. Also, what's interesting is that it doesn't say anything about needing to swear on the Bible. Certain presidents like Theodore Roosevelt, Franklin Pierce, and John Quincy Adams swore or affirmed on the law book, stack of laws, depending on the president. But a lot of other presidents use the Bible. I think every president before John Tyler, who was our 10th president, and we'll talk about him later, it's not for sure that they even swore on the Bible, except for George Washington, of course. According to my research, it just hasn't been documented. So real quickly, this is the president being sworn in. Here's the first lady, or soon-to-be first lady, like a few seconds after this photo was taken, and the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and the outgoing president, Jimmy Carter. Here's another picture of the splendor and the magnificence of a presidential inauguration. This was taken the same day, January 20th, 1981, when Reagan was becoming president, our 40th president of the United States. Okay, Article 2, Section 2 talks about the powers of the president. This isn't like all-inclusive, there's more to it, but here's some of the powers of the president. He's the Commander-in-Chief of the United States military. He gets advice from his cabinet, who are the principal officers in each executive department, such as all the secretaries, Secretary of State, Secretary of the Treasury, Secretary of Defense, Interior, Agriculture, and so on. He grants reprieves, which means canceling or postponing court sentences, and pardons, which means releasing or relieving individuals convicted of crimes, such as when President Ford pardoned President Nixon. With advice and consent of the Senate, the President has the power to make treaties, appoint justices, ambassadors, secretaries, and so forth. He also has the power to make recess appointments without the Senate's approval. Article 2, Section 3 talks about the duties of the President. Again, these are just some of them. He has the duty to deliver the State of the Union address to Congress, which is just what it says, the State of the Union, or how the country is doing, and basically what laws the president wants to see passed within the next year. It was Thomas Jefferson who decided to just write the State of the Union instead of going to Congress himself, and that stuck until President Wilson in 1913, when he kind of resumed the first tradition of just going there in person. President Harding in 1922 had the first State of the Union to be featured on radio. Truman in 1947 had the first State of the Union to be featured on television, and Clinton in 1997 was the first State of the Union to be shown on the World Wide Web. The President also has the duty to convene one or both houses of Congress and adjourns them if necessary, receives ambassadors and other public ministers, faithfully execute or enforce the laws, which is kind of a bit obvious, it's in the oath of office, and commissions all U.S. officers. Okay, now the President, Vice President, and other people working in government, they're not above the law. Section 4 puts a check on that. It says, the President, Vice President, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5 gives power to the House of Representatives to impeach, which basically means to convict or bring charges on an individual. However, Section 3, Clauses 6 to 7 gives power to the Senate to try all impeachments. And normally the Vice President or President pro temp of the Senate preside over the Senate. But in case of the impeachment of President, it's the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Just a little added detail there. Okay, requirement 2 says this: make a list of the Presidents of the United States in the order in which they served, including the following information for each. So here we're going to go through all current presidents as of the making of this merit video. But if you want to do this on your own, A, you need to provide to your commander a picture of each president, maybe a photo, drawing, or painting, dates he served, political party with which he was affiliated, names of his vice president, and we'll get to that. So I now invite you on this journey as we go through each president of the United States, again as of the filming of this video. Number 1, George Washington, 1732 to 1799. Now, you don't have to be like me and memorize every single birth date, death date, and term dates of the president. That was kind of a bit over much. But for the merit, you don't even have to remember them in order or by their number. Just, I recommend taking down notes for your commander and probably find in usually the back of the dictionary or president's book the pictures of the president. But let's talk about George Washington. He served from April 30th, 1789 to March 4th, 1797. He didn't have a political party, rather he actually warned against it in his farewell address. He said, don't use political parties, but we did anyway. The vice president was John Adams. So some fast facts about him. He was nicknamed Father of Our Country. He was Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army during the Revolutionary War. Here's the famous crossing of the Delaware, and it is said that he was complaining of seasickness when this was actually happening, this event. He wore dentures made of, according to my research, human teeth, ivory that may have came from hippopotamus, and alloys of metal. And he's on the quarter and $1 bill. So here are pictures of presidents that I drew, and I just invite you, if you're curious, I'll leave a link in the card above. You'll probably see right now something up here. But if you're curious, I did portraits of all the presidents, not the first time, maybe not the last time. And yeah, some of them are a bit cartoony, but others you might like. So I just invite you if you want. Okay, John Adams, second president, 1735 to 1826. He served from 1797 to 1801. He was a Federalist. And the vice president was Thomas Jefferson. The Federalists sort of favored the Constitution, a strong central government, a national bank and such. among other things, whereas the Democratic Republicans, for example, like Thomas Jefferson, they believed more in states' rights and they emphasized more on the agricultural side and opposed some of the things that the Federalists believed, such as national banks. So the Bill of Rights that was amended in our Constitution in 1791, I believe, was a compromise, basically, and that's what had Thomas Jefferson accept the Constitution. He wouldn't accept it unless the Bill of Rights were added. But anyway, some fast facts about John Adams is that he was the signer of the Declaration of Independence. He spoke with a lisp. He was also multilingual, like Thomas Jefferson and a lot of the founding fathers. He was the first president to live in the White House. It was incomplete when George Washington was in office. His last words were, quote, "Thomas Jefferson survives," even though Jefferson died just hours earlier. And let's point out the death date, July 4th, 1826, the same day as Thomas Jefferson. Now, both of them were signers of the Declaration of Independence, and they both died on the 50th anniversary. So let's talk about number 3, Thomas Jefferson, 1743 to 1826. He served from 1801 to 1809, and he was a Democratic Republican, just like I was just talking about. He had 2 vice presidents, not at the same time, Aaron Burr and George Clinton. And you could do your research of what happened with Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton if you want. So here's some fast facts about him. He was the author, or at least the principal author and signer of the Declaration of Independence. He died on the 50th anniversary of its adoption. It wasn't signed on July 4th, or at least for the most part. It was mainly signed on August 2nd, according to what I researched. He's on the nickel and the $2 bill. I was in 3rd grade when I first learned about the $2 bill, and then shortly after I saw one in person, so I got one. So he was the proponent of states' rights. His gravestone inscription that he had written himself did not mention anything about being president. He had pet mockingbirds, and in his administration was the Louisiana Purchase, where this entire land in green was purchased from France for $15 million, which was unprecedented at the time. Okay, number 4, James Madison, 1751 to 1836. He served from 1809 to 1817. He was a Democratic Republican, and the vice presidents were George Clinton and Elbridge Gerry. Some fast facts about him is that he is nicknamed the Father of the Constitution. He was the one that really proposed the Bill of Rights, and he was a major proponent to the Constitution. He was the shortest president, 5'4" and about 100 pounds. He was Princeton University's first graduate student, and he is on the $5,000 bill. Yes. And he was president during the War of 1812, the war in which the White House actually burned. The First Lady, Dolly Madison, actually saved the famous Lansdowne portrait of George Washington. It's also the time when Francis Scott Key written what is known as our national anthem. Okay, number 5, James Monroe, 1758 to 1831. He served from 1817 to 1825, a Democratic Republican, and the vice president was Daniel D. Tompkins. Some fast facts about him were, he's the president during the era of good feelings. Basically after the War of 1812, there was like a tranquil time in America, but it was short-lived. Once Monroe left office, then the era of good feelings went with him. During his administration was the Monroe Doctrine in 1823, and it's called the Monroe Doctrine even though John Quincy Adams, who was, I believe, the Secretary of State, actually written it. But it was basically telling Europe to stay out of the Western Hemisphere, especially in terms of colonizing and such. And he was the 3rd to die on Independence Day. Not only that, but remember the first 2 died July 4th, 1826. And then 1826 weeks later, in 1831, James Monroe died. Okay, number 6, John Quincy Adams, 1767 to 1848. He served from 1825 to 1829. I heard that those were the most terrible years of his life, according to a history book, a president's book that I read. He was not really a happy man. Kind of suffered from depression, but he was a Democratic Republican. Vice President was John Calhoun. Some fast facts about him is that he is the son of second President John Adams. He was the first president to be photographed in 1843. He would skinny dip in the Potomac before breakfast. And according to what I heard, one time a reporter came out and caught him and refused to give him back his clothes unless the reporter got an interview. And he fell unconscious while serving in the U.S. House of Representatives. This was after he was president, and he died 2 days thereafter. Number 7, Andrew Jackson, 1767 to 1845. He served from 1829 to 1837. He was a Democrat. He was the first Democrat. And the vice presidents were John Calhoun and Martin Van Buren. Some fast facts about him: that he was a war hero. He served as a general in the War of 1812. His nickname was Old Hickory. He's on the $20 bill. And he was the first president to face an assassination attempt in early 1835. The story goes is that the person's gun backfired, and so he dropped it and pulled out another gun, and that one backfired. And according to what I researched, the odds of that is 125,000 to 1. And it was point-blank range, too. He had a 1,400-pound block of cheese in the White House. Alright, number 8, Martin Van Buren, 1782 to 1862. He served from 1837 to 1841. He was a Democrat, and the vice president was Richard M. Johnson. Some fast facts about him: he was nicknamed Old Kinderhook. In fact, I heard that in his campaign speeches, everybody would shout, "OK, OK" for Old Kinderhook. Okay, get it? Okay, he is the first president to have been born in the United States. Technically, because we didn't declare independence until 1776, and he wasn't born until 1782, and all the other 7 presidents preceding him were born before 1776. Dutch was his first language, not English, as his parents immigrated from the Netherlands. That's why his surname is Van Buren. Van kind of denotes Dutch. And since he was widowed at the time he was president, his daughter-in-law assumed the duties of First Lady. Number 9, William Henry Harrison, 1773 to 1841. He served from March 4th to April 4th, 1841. His political party was a Whig. He was the first Whig in office. The vice president was John Tyler. Some fast facts about him: he was a major general in the War of 1812. The campaign song was Tippecanoe and Tyler too when he was running for president. And Tippecanoe kind of went back to a battle that he faced several years before running for office that he became known for. He had the longest inaugural address in history, over an hour and a half, during a snowstorm, and with no coat. Therefore, he served the shortest presidency in history, dying 1 month, 31 days after assuming office, either of pneumonia or typhoid. It's not exactly clear, but him wearing no coat led to his demise on April 4th. So, our 10th president, John Tyler, assumed the presidency. Okay, John Tyler, 1790 to 1862. He served from April 4th, 1841 to March 4th, 1845. I put an asterisk there because this is like the first of an extraordinary inauguration. Technically, he became president when William Henry Harrison died on the day, but he wasn't actually sworn in until April 6, 1841. So he was a Whig, and the vice president, he didn't have any, because he was vice president, and then he took over, and the Constitution didn't specify anything to that. So it took a very long time before all that was figured out. But in the meantime, the vice presidents who took over president typically did not have a vice president themselves. Okay, so the fast facts about him is that he was dubbed His Accidency as a result instead of his presidency because he took over. He died after being elected to the Confederate Congress of the CSA. Now, if you're not familiar with the Civil War yet, that was between the Union in the North and the Confederacy in the South, also known as the Confederate States of America, which is what CSA stood for. The CSA was pretty much from Virginia to south of Virginia, all the way to Georgia. Because John Tyler was born in Virginia, he remained loyal to Virginia, and so when Virginia succeeded the Union to join the Confederacy, John Tyler therefore pledged to the Confederacy. So he ran for the Confederate Congress and was essentially like Benedict Arnold to the Union. And so when he died in 1862, the United States Congress didn't technically observe the death of John Tyler, and John Tyler is the only former president whose coffin was not draped over by an American flag or with an American flag. However, he did have 15 children, more children than any other president, and as of 2020, as of filming this, one of his grandsons is still alive, and another died in September 2020. So I taught this in the fall of 2020, November, December at my outpost, and while I was getting my slides together, I found out that the second grandson had died in September, but as of now, one is still alive. Okay, number 11, James Knox Polk, 1795 to 1849. He served from 1845 to 1849. He was a Democrat, and the vice president was George Mifflin Dallas. Some fast facts about him were the First Lady banned drinking, dancing, and card games, so his wife did, due to her being very religious. The term manifest destiny was coined in an 1845 article. So remember that you have the Louisiana Purchase, so we acquired that land, we purchased that land from France, and then we continued to expand west. And manifest destiny was kind of the idea that that God is directing us or telling us, America, to expand all the way to the west coast. So Texas was annexed or added later in 1845. It became a state, and he died a few months after leaving office. Number 12, Zachary Taylor, 1784 to 1850. Served from 1849 to 1850. He had another extraordinary inauguration, which I'll get to. His political party was the Whig Party. The vice president was Millard Fillmore. So the fast facts about him: he was a war hero. He served as a major general in the Mexican-American War in the 1840s. For weeks, he did not even know that the Whig Party nominated him as candidate for president. I invite you to do more research if you want to research more about how political parties work, how they nominate people for president. He was the first president to be elected without serving in any political office beforehand. And asterisk, he refused to be inaugurated on Sunday, March 4th, 1849, because it was a Sunday. So he wasn't inaugurated until the 5th. However, there's a story that goes that a man named David Rice Atkinson actually became president for 24 hours for the time being. But technically, according to what I researched, technically it doesn't really count, because no matter what happened, as soon as James Polk's term expired on noon, March 4th, 1849, Zachary Taylor did become president, but he wasn't sworn in until a day later. So David Rice Atkinson went on to say that he was the most honest president this nation had, just as a little joke. And he was the second president to die in office due to eating raw fruit and iced milk for like a 4th of July celebration. So he died shortly after, on July 9th. Number 13, Millard Fillmore, 1800 to 1853. He served from July 9th, 1850 to March 4th, 1853. Again, he wasn't actually sworn in until the 10th, I believe, due to the because he had an extraordinary inauguration. He was the last president who was of the Whig Party and did not have a vice president because he took over. So the fast facts about him was that he was the first president to be born in the 19th century, very close to New Year's Day, in fact. He established a library at the White House. He loved books. In fact, it said that he fought a fire at the Library of Congress. And he helped pass the Compromise of 1850 that President Taylor helped push. And out of the Compromise of 1850, part of it came California, that became a state on September 9th that year. Number 14, Franklin Pierce, 1804 to 1869. He served from 1853 to 1857. He was a Democrat, and the vice president was William R. King. Some fast facts about him is that he was the first president to affirm the oath instead of swearing it. Again, you could say, I do solemnly swear, or affirm. A lot of presidents swore instead of affirm, but he was the first to affirm. He also used a law book in lieu of the Bible. He was the first to deliver his inaugural address from memory, and he was also known as Young Hickory. Number 15, James Buchanan, 1791 to 1868. He served from 1857 to 1861. He was a Democrat. The vice president was John A. Breckinridge. Some fast facts about him was that he was the last president to be born in the 18th century, 1791. He had the first inauguration to be photographed, and there's a picture of it. And he was a lifelong bachelor and was never married. Number 16, Abraham Lincoln, 1809 to 1865. He served from March 4th, 1861 to April 15th, 1865 at 7:22 in the morning, just in case you wanted to know. The political party was Republican. Again, he was the first Republican after being a Whig toward the beginning of his political career. The Republican Party itself wasn't created until 1854, I believe, and Abraham Lincoln was a Whig until 1856 when he became a Republican, and ultimately the first Republican that this nation ever had as president. And his vice president for the first term was Hannibal Hamlin, and then it became Andrew Johnson during his second term. Some fast facts about him were, he was president during the Civil War, which lasted from 1861 to 1865. He was the first president to be assassinated. He's in the Wrestling Hall of Fame. He only lost one match out of 300. And he was known as Honest Abe. And the story goes, and with a lot of stories with details, with little details like this, there might be some fluctuation depending on what your source is. But basically, when he was working as a clerk, a man gave him 6 cents extra. And, I know that that's only 6 cents, but after he was done working, he walked a few miles just to return the 6 cents. And that's why he's known as Honest Abe. He was born in Kentucky. He moved up to Illinois and Indiana, and he became a lawyer. One of his favorite books was about George Washington when he was younger. He loved reading as well as talking. He would go to church, and then he would come out and quote almost word for word what the pastor said. So that, among a lot of other neat things about Abraham Lincoln. And he is on the cent since 1909 and the $5 bill. The person that designed the Lincoln cent was Victor David Bruner, an immigrant, and Theodore Roosevelt saw a work that he did of Lincoln, an engraving, and thought that should be on a coin. But long story short, that's how we got the Lincoln cent, 1 century after Lincoln was born. Number 17, Andrew Johnson, 1808 to 1875. He served from 1865 to 1869. He was a Democrat and did not have a vice president. Some fast facts about him was that he was the first to be impeached in the mid-1860s and remained in office by 1 vote, Senator Edmund Ross of Kansas. He never attended school and had to self-teach himself how to read and write with the help of his wife Eliza. Number 18, Hiram Ulysses Grant, 1822 to 1885. He served from 1869 to 1877. He was a Republican, and the vice presidents were Schuyler Colfax and Henry Wilson. Some fast facts about him was that he was a Civil War general in 1864 till the surrender from the Confederacy in 1865. The S does not stand for anything, but what S am I talking about? He's also known as Ulysses S. Grant, so if that's what you heard and you thought it was strange that I called him Hiram Ulysses Grant, then that's the reason. This is his birth name, Hiram Ulysses Grant, but it was a mistake on his application to West Point Military Academy where that S was in there, but again, it didn't stand for anything, so some people say Simpson, which was, I believe, his mother's maiden name. He couldn't do anything about it, like your badge number and I believe the fire department, military. You can't like go and ask for a change or whatnot. And besides, I don't think he was fond of his name anyway because his initials spelled Hug, and Ulysses S. Grant, that's USG, US, something like United States and such. He got a speeding ticket, and yes, this was decades before the automobile, but basically he was riding his horse too fast and got a speeding ticket. But when the person saw that he was President Grant, he tried to say, oh, that's okay, just don't do it again. But Grant paid the ticket anyway, and I think it was $20, a $20 fine. And he's on the $50 bill. Number 19, Rutherford Burchard Hayes, 1822 to 1893. He served from March 4th, 1877 to March 4th, 1881. He had an extraordinary inauguration. He was inaugurated the next day. I believe because March 4th, 1877 was a Sunday. Political party was Republican. The vice president was William Wheeler. Some fast facts about him was that he was a Civil War veteran, advanced to Major General, and wounded 4 times. He started the annual Easter egg roll in 1878. According to the story that I read, he was taking a walk and some of the children were asking if they could have an Easter egg roll at the White House lawn, and it became a tradition ever since. He was the first to be sworn in as president privately, but later swore the oath in public. Number 20, James Abram Garfield, 1831 to 1881. He served from March 4th to September 19th, 1881. His political party was Republican, and the vice president was Chester A. Arthur. Now, I done research, and the cat Garfield, the comic strip, and then later an animated series, was actually not named after the president. I was curious, but it was named after the grandfather, I believe, of the creator of Garfield, who was also named James Garfield. Some fast facts about him were: he became president of his college at the age of 26. He was the first ambidextrous president, which means he could write with both hands. He was the second to be assassinated. He was shot twice on July 2nd, 1881, and succumbed to his wounds on September 19th. Number 21, Chester Alan Arthur, 1829 to 1886. He served from September 19th, 1881 to March 4th, 1885. He did not take the oath of office until the next day on the 20th. The political party was Republican and did not have a vice president. Some fast facts about him was that he owned 80 pairs of pants. Now that was extravagant back then. His family immigrated from Scotland, and their original surname was MacArthur. He got fired once by President Hayes in 1878, and he was a New York lawyer. Number 22 and 24, Stephen Grover Cleveland, 1837 to 1908. For his 22nd presidential administration, he served from 1885 to 1889, and for his 24th, he served from 1893 to 1897. He was a Democrat, and the vice presidents were Thomas Hendricks and Adlai Stevenson. Fast facts about him: he was the first to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. That's why he's our 22nd and our 24th. Therefore, he is currently the only president to attend 2 inaugurations as outgoing president. He was an executioner before becoming president. He hid the fact that he had a cancerous tumor on the roof of his mouth, and he also hid his surgeries as well. They kind of disguised it like he went on a boat ride, but he was actually having surgery. And I believe that was during the Panic of 1893, which is probably why he didn't want the entire country to be further panicked. He was the first president to be married in the White House. And he's on the $1,000 bill. Number 23, Benjamin Harrison, 1833 to 1901. He served from 1889 to 1893. He was a Republican, and the vice president was Levi P. Morton. Some fast facts about him is that he was known as the Centennial President. Why? It's because he was inaugurated in 1889, 1 century after George Washington was inaugurated in that year, 1789, but it was April 30th when Washington was inaugurated. Electricity was installed in the White House during his administration, but he and his wife were too afraid of being electrocuted by the light switch and chose to leave the lights on regularly day and night. He was also the grandson of 9th President William Henry Harrison, and in fact, both Harrisons were the ancestor of my U.S. history teacher, my late U.S. history teacher, unfortunately, over at Newport Harbor High School. Number 25, William McKinley, 1843 to 1901. He served from 1897 to 1901. He was a Republican, and the vice presidents were Garrett Hobart and Theodore Roosevelt. Some fast facts about him. He had the first inauguration to be filmed by a motion picture camera. He was the third president to be assassinated by Leon Chalgaz, who was an anarchist. And he's on the $500 bill. Number 26, Theodore Roosevelt, 1858 to 1919. He served from 1901 to 1909. He was a Republican, and he didn't have a vice president at first, but in this case he actually later got one, Charles Fairbanks. After completing William McKinley's term, he ran for president and won. Some fast facts about him, and there's a lot to say about him, but here's a couple of things. He was the 33rd governor of New York. He was the first president to fly in an airplane. He hated the moniker Teddy, or the name Teddy. He was a conservationist and established several national parks, forests, and monuments. He was shot during a campaign speech in October 1912, but decided to deliver his 90-minute speech anyway before seeking medical attention. In fact, this is his actual x-ray. This is the speech, or you see a picture of the speech there with a bullet hole through. And I believe these are his eyeglasses case too. So it was a powerful bullet, but when he went up to speak, he said something to the effect, "I'm not sure if you realize that I've been shot, but it takes more than a bullet to kill a bull moose." He ended up losing the election of 1912, but that just shows how tough he was. Another thing about the bullet is that doctors determined that it was too risky to take it out, so he kept that bullet inside of him for the next few years of his life until 1919 when he died. He actually witnessed Lincoln's funeral procession in Manhattan, New York City when he was 6. In fact, he was born the day before Macy's started, according to what I researched in the past. It is also claimed that he had a photographic memory. Number 27, William Howard Taft, 1857 to 1930. He served from 1909 to 1913. He was a Republican, and the vice president was James Sherman. Some fast facts about him. He was the heaviest president, over 300 pounds, but he dropped 70 of those pounds upon leaving office. He kept a cow named Pauline Wayne at the White House lawn. He was a wrestler, baseball fan, tennis player, dancer, horseback rider, and golfer. And now the New Jersey bathtub fiasco of 1915. Now, there is, I guess a legend you'd call it, that he actually got stuck in the White House bathtub, which isn't true, but there is a true story after he left office in a New Jersey hotel, I believe. And after filling the bathtub, he didn't account for the water being displaced upon entering or stepping into the bathtub. So water splashed everywhere, and dripped down the floor and onto the people downstairs. And that happened in 1915. And he became Supreme Court Chief Justice and inaugurated Coolidge and Hoover. So you have the Supreme Court, you have all the justices, but there's one Chief Justice, and that's the justice that inaugurates the president and also presides over the Senate whenever there's like an impeachment of the president. And from what I've researched in the past, Taft liked the judicial branch more than the executive branch the entire time, so this was kind of his dream to actually serve as a justice instead of president. Number 28, Thomas Woodrow Wilson, 1856 to 1924. He served from 1913 to 1921. He was a Democrat, and the vice president was Thomas Marshall. Some fast facts about him. He was president during World War I, which began in the summer of 1914, and then the U.S. entered April 6, 1917, and then that lasted till November 11, 1918, when Armistice Day happened. He suffered a paralyzing stroke in 1919, the year after the war, and it is said that we had our first woman president, or at least that's what a book from the History Channel sort of joked about. But when he had a stroke, his wife Edith Wilson actually took over the duties of president because she didn't really like the vice president and Thomas Marshall, and didn't want to think what this country would do with him at the helm. So Edith Wilson sort of took over what the president would normally have done. But technically I believe that Woodrow Wilson was still president, but just incapacitated at the time. And yeah, a woman, so to speak, ran the country for a while. He is on the $100,000 bill. When he was president, he kind of helped start the Federal Reserve. And this is the last president I get to share with you who was on such a high denomination like $100,000. There is a $10,000 bill, but that's Salmon P. Chase, and he was not a president. He nominated the first Jewish justice to the Supreme Court, and was the first president to give a live nationwide radio broadcast. Number 29, Warren Gamaliel Bancroft Winnipeg Harding, 1865 to 1923, and yes, he had 5 names. He served from 1921 to 1923. He was a Republican, and the vice president was Calvin Coolidge. Some fast facts about him is that he was elected on his 55th birthday in 1920, which was the first election where women had the right to vote, thanks to the 19th Amendment. He was the first president to ride to and from his inauguration via automobile. He died of a heart attack in San Francisco at age 57 while in office. Before he was president, he was a teacher, reporter, newspaper owner, and an insurance agent. He played the sousaphone as well. Number 30, John Calvin Coolidge, 1872 to 1933. He served from 1923 to 1929. He was a Republican. He didn't have a vice president at first, but was elected in the next election, and the vice president was Charles Gates Dawes. Some fast facts about him was that he was born on Independence Day. Also, his oath was administered by his father just before 3 in the morning, August 3, 1923. His father was Justice of the Peace over in Vermont. His nickname was Silent Cal because he hardly spoke much. He had the first inauguration to be broadcasted on radio, and that was his second inauguration in 1925. He died the same day the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco began construction. Number 31, Herbert Clark Hoover, 1874 to 1964. He served from 1929 to 1933. He was a Republican, and the vice president was Charles Curtis. Some fast facts about him. He was the first president to be born west of the Mississippi. He was born in Iowa. He spoke Mandarin with his wife. He majored in geology and became a mining engineer in China, so he traveled to different countries. That's kind of how he learned Mandarin. I believe he also worked in the outback in Australia. He became a self-made millionaire. His inauguration was the first with a sound newsreel. Former President Taft administered the oath but misquoted it. So you could see in the picture here, you could see Supreme Court Justice William Howard Taft, and he did misquote it. You could hear it in the sound newsreel. He misquoted a part, and after that he stepped down. He written a letter about his memory slipping and messing up and such, and again he died just days over a year after the inauguration. Number 32, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, 1882 to 1945. He served from 1933 to 1945. He was a Democrat, and the vice presidents were John Gardner, Henry Wallace, and Harry S. Truman. Some fast facts about him was that he was the only president to serve more than 2 terms. And it was afterward, when the 22nd Amendment was passed, or added to our Constitution, and that limited the presidential terms to 2 terms. He had polio and was confined in a wheelchair, and that was kept a secret. He was 5th cousins with Theodore Roosevelt, 26th president. He married his 5th cousin once removed, Eleanor Roosevelt, and upon marriage, Eleanor already had the surname Roosevelt attached to her. So there wasn't like a big name change or something. She was already a Roosevelt, but so distant that they could legally marry. He was an avid stamp collector, which became a catharsis or a release, especially since he was president during the Great Depression and World War II. He died in office from a cerebral hemorrhage. This is the picture on the left is the last picture taken of FDR, which was the day before he died, and then at the same time there was a painting being made of him which ended up being unfinished. So a year after he died in 1946, he started appearing on the dime, and as of making this, he's still on the dime today. Number 33, Harry S. Truman, 1884 to 1972. He served from 1945 to 1953. He was a Democrat, and the vice president was Alvin Barkley. Some fast facts about him. In 1947, his inauguration was the first to be televised. He memorized the eye chart to get into the Missouri National Guard, and subsequently entered World War I. That's because he had poor eyesight. The S does not stand for anything in Harry S. Truman, that's why I didn't put a period after S. Number 34, David Dwight Eisenhower, which later was rearranged to Dwight David Eisenhower, but his birth name was David Dwight, 1890 to 1969. He served from 1953 to 1961. He was a Republican. And the vice president is Richard M. Nixon. Try to remember that name if you don't recognize that name yet. Some fast facts about him was that he had the family nickname of Ike. He was one of America's top generals. He planned the D-Day invasion on June 6, 1944. That's when it was carried out, the Battle of Normandy. He served in both World War I and World War II, and served over 3 decades in the military. However, he never served in combat. He was the first president to ride in a helicopter. Theodore Roosevelt was the first to ride in a plane, and he was the first to ride in a helicopter. He was an avid painter, and he was on the Eisenhower dollar in the 1970s, the last of the large dollars. And then in 1979 he had the Susan B. Anthony, and that sort of dropped down to near quarter size. Number 35, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, 1917 to 1963. He served from 1961 to 1963. He was a Democrat, and the vice president was Lyndon B. Johnson. Some fast facts about him, and there's a lot to say about him too, but here's some. He served in the Navy during World War II and escaped death. He became a hero and is the only president to have earned the Purple Heart. He was the first Boy Scout to be president. He is the only president to win a Pulitzer Prize, and that's because he became an author. He donated his entire congressional and presidential salary to charity. He was elected to Congress in 1946, 1 century after Lincoln was elected to Congress. and he donated that salary to charity. And then he was elected to president in 1960, 100 years after Lincoln, and he donated his entire presidential salary to charity as well. And yes, there are tons of Lincoln-Kennedy eerie coincidences that you could look up if you don't know about those already. He could read about 10 times the average reader, so he was a speed reader, he was a speed talker. I believe that every morning he would read several different newspapers from across the country. But he was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. This is an actual picture taken just sometime right before being shot. You could see Jacqueline Kennedy, the First Lady, as well as Governor Connally, who was governor in Texas at the time. And to honor his legacy, he was placed on the Kennedy $50 a year after he was assassinated in 1964, and he's still on the $50 today. Okay, number 36, Lyndon Baines Johnson, 1908 to 1973. He served from 1963 to 1969. He was a Democrat, and the vice president was Hubert Humphrey. Some fast facts about him were: he is the only president to be inaugurated in an airplane and the first to be sworn in by a woman, Justice Sarah T. Hughes, that you could see in that photo right there. You could also see that Jacqueline Kennedy is standing right next to him, and she's wearing the same coat that she was wearing, and it still had some of JFK's blood on it. He escaped death in World War II. The story goes is that he exited a plane to use the restroom, but boarded a different aircraft upon returning. His original plane was destroyed in battle, but the second plane survived. He signed the Civil Rights Act in 1964. That's a picture of him at the signing, shaking hands with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He also signed the Voting Rights Act in 1965. And both the Civil Rights and the Voting Rights Act were there to prevent racial discrimination. So equal rights, no more of the Jim Crow laws, the white versus colored signs, and that people of different color would not be denied the right to vote because of that. So the 13th Amendment prohibited slavery, but it took a century later before these acts were signed to prohibit discrimination. And it took a lot of key figures in the civil rights movement, including Dr. King. Number 37, Richard Milhous Nixon, 1913 to 1994. He served from 1969 to 1974. He was a Republican. His vice presidents were Spiro Agnew and Gerald Ford. This is kind of a bit close to home for me personally, since just about half hour or less away from here is his actual birthplace in Yorba Linda, California. So the day after President's Day in 2008, we went over there. I was very excited to go to another presidential library, and not only that, but his birthplace as well. But we couldn't go inside the house because it was raining. So some fast facts about him was that he served as vice president under Eisenhower. That's why I said remember that name when we talked about Eisenhower. Milhous was his mother's maiden name, and that became his middle name. He was the first president to resign in 1974, and that's because of the Watergate scandal that he tried to cover up, and that's a whole story in itself. But because of the things that happened, he was going to be impeached, and if he was impeached, he'd probably be the first president actually removed from office. So before all that hassle, he went ahead and resigned. The thing is that this took place in 1972, the Watergate scandal I'm talking about, before the election. However, in the election of 1972, if you look at the Electoral College map, he still won in a landslide. But everything caught up to him, and he ended up resigning. And if you look at that picture where he's holding up the double V, V for victory, in 1974, I actually been to that helicopter February 2008 when we visited it. But again, we couldn't go in because of the rain and all that. Whenever a president rides in that helicopter, it's called Marine One. Whenever a former president rides in that helicopter, then, how I understand it, it's called Executive One. Just like the plane, you have Air Force One for the president, and you also have Air Force Two for the vice president. And I've seen both Air Force One and Air Force Two before, but they were both the C-32s, or the modified 757. but technically they were operating as Air Force One and Air Force Two both times that I saw it. However, while President Nixon was on his way to California on that helicopter from the White House lawn to California, Gerald Ford became president. He was inaugurated president, and I believe it was noon. And at that time, Richard Nixon was no longer president. So that helicopter went from Marine One to Executive One during a flight. And I think that's the only time that's ever happened. Another quick thing about Marine One is Marine One flew over my head twice in 2013 and 2014. There's actually two of them, and they do that on purpose so that nobody knows which one the president's on. Even though he is best known to resign, there are other things that we can remember him by, such as his love for football. He was also an avid bowler and could play 5 instruments. And it is said that he made the longest long-distance phone call in history. Where do you think that is? The other side of the world? No, try 238,900 miles away at the moon. In 1969, 6 months after he was inaugurated, man landed on the moon, Armstrong and Aldrin. And Nixon called and had a conversation with him, and you could listen to that online if you're interested. But think about it, over 238,900 miles away, approximately. So that does have to be the longest long-distance phone call ever. I think the next milestone is a phone call to Mars, and I don't think we're that far off because of the Space Force and all that. Number 38, Gerald Rudolph Ford, 1913 to 2006. He served from 1974 to 1977. Republican, and the vice president was Nelson Rockefeller. Some fast facts about him were, he turned down being a professional football player to study law. He did coach football, however, while studying at Yale. He was the first president, and currently only president, to have attained the rank of Eagle Scout in the Boy Scouts of America. He is the only politician to serve both as president and vice president without being elected. So here's the summary. He was a member of the House of Representatives. His goal was to become Speaker of the House, and it just wasn't working out. He was serving as the House Minority Leader right before becoming vice president, because Spiro Agnew was having some white-collar crime charges against him, and Spiro Agnew ended up resigning. So they need to have a vice president for Nixon, and this is the first time that the 25th Amendment had to be enforced for something like this, according to prior studies of mine. So he wasn't elected with Richard Nixon to become vice president, but he was chosen by Congress to become vice president. And then, since Nixon resigned, he ended up being, by default, president, because it talks about in Article 2 of the Constitution that if anything is to happen to the president, then all the powers and duties get devolved to the vice president. And that's what happened. So one last thing to say about Gerald Ford is a personal experience. The day that he died, I was watching Rudolph's Shiny New Year. I was in grade 6, and all of a sudden a special news report came on for about 10 minutes announcing the death of Gerald Ford, and I'll never forget that. Number 39, James Earl Carter, also known as Jimmy Carter, and he was born October 1st, 1924. He served from 1977 to 1981. He was a Democrat. The vice president was Walter Mondale. Some fast facts about him were that he was the first president to be born in a hospital. He created the Department of Energy in response to the energy shortage crisis. He won the Nobel Peace Prize after leaving office in 2002. He is the author of 30 books. And he is still alive today. He is 96 years old as of the filming of this, and nothing is slowing him down. This is him a couple of years ago as well, and he is currently the oldest president to have ever lived. Number 40, Ronald Wilson Reagan, 1911 to 2004. He served from 1981 to 1989. His political party was Republican, and the vice president was George H.W. Bush. Here are some fast facts about him. He was a Hollywood actor and worked with a chimpanzee as a movie star. He was the first divorced president. He divorced Jane Wyman in 1948. And he was the 33rd governor of California from 1967 to 1975. Now I want you to look close at this picture and tell me what you notice. You probably noticed that's Governor Reagan. He was governor when this picture was taken. But you probably noticed the Royal Ranger emblem here. This man right here is Johnny Barnes, Reverend Johnny Barnes, the main person who founded Royal Rangers in 1962. So here's Johnny Barnes, David Barnes, then Governor Ronald Reagan, and this took place in 1968. The person on the end here was Herb Ellingwood, and so I'm going to read you something that was adapted from the Royal Rangers History website. Herb Ellingwood was a member of the Northern California Nevada District staff, and he was the one who arranged the meeting with the Governor of California. In high school, he became friends with a person named Edwin Meese, who later became the 75th U.S. Attorney General under President Ronald Reagan. Ellingwood and Meese both attended college at Yale University, and then went on to Stanford and U.S. Berkeley respectively for law school. They both continued their friendship while practicing law in Northern California. Meese became Governor Reagan's chief of staff. Herb became deputy counsel and advisor to Governor Reagan. Herb, through the assistance of Edwin Meese, arranged for Commander Johnny Barnes to meet Governor Reagan at the California Capitol in Sacramento, when Governor Reagan presented Johnny with the California state flag. Governor Reagan even joked with David Barnes that the RR collar pin actually stood for Ronald Reagan and not Royal Rangers. In later years, Ellingwood was a part of the Pasadena Prophecy in 1970 that was given over Reagan, who was governor at the time, that if he would follow the Lord's commands, he would move to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, which ended up being fulfilled in 1981. When President Reagan moved to Washington, D.C., Ellingwood went with him to serve as a deputy White House counsel and chairman of the U.S. Merit Systems Protection Board. He was very involved in developing the National Day of Prayer into what it is today. During the 25th anniversary celebration for Royal Rangers in 1987, President Reagan, in a congratulatory letter to Johnny Barnes, stated that he wished there were more men like Johnny Barnes that were willing to work with the boys and young men of America. In later years, Herb Ellingwood would join up with Pat Robertson of the Christian Broadcasting Network, CBN, in his presidential bid for the Republican nomination in 1988 before passing away in March of 1998 in Reno, Nevada. President Reagan survived an assassination attempt shortly after entering office, and he loved jelly beans and playing with his earlobes. And one last thing I want to add about Ronald Reagan is more of a personal story. I will never forget hearing about his death in 2004. I was walking adjacent to the kitchen in that tiled hallway, and my mother was in the living room couch, and she looked over at me, and sadly, she said, "President Reagan just died." And I'll never forget it. I was in 3rd grade at the time. Number 41, George Herbert Walker Bush, 1924 to 1918. He served from 1989 to 1993. He was a Republican, and the vice president was Dan Quayle. Some fast facts about him. He was the youngest pilot in the U.S. Navy at the time he served. He achieved the rank of lieutenant. He flew for 58 combat missions during World War II, and he was shot down by the Japanese over the Pacific and rescued by a U.S. submarine. He was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. Number 42, William Jefferson Blythe III, also known as Bill Clinton, and he was born August 19, 1964. He served from 1993 to 2001. He was a Democrat, and the vice president was Albert Gore. Here's some fast facts about him. He played the saxophone, and this was from a show that he went on in 1992 during the election season. He won a couple of Grammy Awards after leaving office. He was the 40th and 42nd governor of Arkansas prior to becoming the 42nd president. He met President Kennedy in 1963, and this was one of 2 major things that he claimed to have made such an impact on his life in 1963. It was this plus the I Have a Dream speech that Dr. King also made August 28, 1963. He was the 2nd president to get impeached, which occurred in the late 1990s, but like President Andrew Johnson, he was acquitted and remained president. Number 43, George Walker Bush. He was born July 6, 1946. He served from 2001 to 2009. His political party was Republican, and the vice president was Richard Cheney. Some fast facts about him were: he was a pilot in the National Guard in Texas and Alabama. He was the first president to have a master's in business administration, and he co-owned the Texas Rangers baseball team. He is the only president to have had twins. Number 44, Barack Hussein Obama II. He was born August 4th, 1961. He served from 2009 to 2017. He was a Democrat, and the vice president was Joseph R. Biden. Here are some fast facts about him. He was the first African-American president. He was born in Hawaii less than 2 years after it was admitted to the Union as our 50th state, which was August 21st, 1959. His first job was scooping ice cream at Baskin-Robbins, after which he hated ice cream, he said. He was a senior lecturer at the University of Chicago Law School prior to being elected United States Senator from Illinois in 2004. He was a state senator of Illinois' 13th District, and he was the first president to have his official photo taken digitally. Number 45, Donald John Trump. He was born June 14, 1946. He began serving on January 20th, 2017. He is a Republican, and the vice president is Michael R. Pence. Some fast facts about him are that he was born in Queens, New York City, and took over his father's real estate business in 1971, which ultimately became a source of why he became very wealthy. Here he is in a helicopter flying over Manhattan, along with the former World Trade Center. He was the first president to be a billionaire prior to entering office. He appeared as cameos in several television shows and movies, such as Home Alone 2 and The Little Rascals, and he hosted The Apprentice, as well as Celebrity Apprentice. He authored 19 books. He was the third president to get impeached in 2019, but like the two before him were acquitted. He is the first president to cross the demilitarized zone and step into North Korea. And this is interesting, especially for economists, and there is an economics merit. It's a silver merit if you're interested in expedition rangers. But the Dow Jones Industrial Average peaked at 20,000 points, which never happened before, I believe 5 days after entering office, and later peaked at 30,000 in November 2020, which has never happened before. He helped create the United States Space Force, and now we have 6 branches in the U.S. military, next to Army, Navy, Coast Guard, Air Force, and the Marine Corps. And I have family members in a lot of the ones I just mentioned. Okay, requirement 3. Complete any 3 of the following activities. A. Make a list of the presidents who died in office, including the cause of death. B. As a patrol, act out a scene from the life of a president, such as a speech, signing a bill, declaration of war, making a dedication, presenting an award, signing a treaty, or other important event. C. Make a collection of items related to at least 5 different presidents, such as coins, stamps, postcards, artwork, stickers, patches, campaign buttons, and other souvenirs. D. Make a collection of at least 5 different items related to a single president, such as coins, stamps, postcards, artwork, stickers, patches, campaign buttons, or other souvenirs. E. Make or purchase a costume of a president, wear it to an outpost meeting, school event, or other similar event. I remember for Halloween in 7th grade I was George Washington, and in 8th grade and 9th grade I was Abraham Lincoln. Long story short. F. Visit a presidential historical site, such as a birthplace, home, battlefield, place that they stayed the night, vehicle they used, or a presidential museum or library, and describe what you learned from the visit. And here's pictures when we went to the Reagan Library in Simi Valley, California, the left picture, as well as the Richard Nixon Library in 2008. G. Play a game related to American presidents. H. Watch 2 different documentaries about the same president and compare how the president is portrayed favorably or unfavorably. Also, contrast which details of the president's life the film chose to emphasize. One great channel is the History Channel. I. Watch a documentary and a dramatic film about the same president and compare how the president is portrayed favorably or unfavorably. Also, contrast which details of the president's life the film chose to emphasize. J. Make a poster, computer slideshow, or video highlighting the important details of a president's life and accomplishments while in office. K. If a presidential election campaign is underway, pick a candidate to profile, listing the name, age, political party, and a few of their key beliefs and campaign promises of the candidate. Predict whether or not you think this candidate will get elected. L. Listen to a presidential speech. Select a few important quotes from the speech and say them aloud to your patrol or group. If you can, try to sound like the president when you are talking.
So first of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
So, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
Therefore, I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Freedom itself was attacked this morning by a faceless coward, and freedom will be defended.
I can hear you, the rest of the world hears you, and the people who knocked these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
M. Make a list of 10 places named after a president. These may include states, cities, schools, government buildings, airports, military craft, parks, trees, mountains, etc., such as the Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport and Washington Street. N. Read at least 2 historical documents from a president. Summarize what they are about and why they are important. O. View at least 5 objects that belong to a president at a presidential museum or library, either in person or on a website, such as the Smithsonian Institute. Explain why these objects were important to the president. P. Create a piece of artwork about a president. It could be a portrait or a depiction of a famous scene during his presidency. Q. Write a song or poem about a president. R. Build a model of a presidential home or something named after a president. S. Give a brief oral report on a historical presidential election. Show maps that depict which states he won and lost. Recount what the popular vote and the electoral college votes were. Explain who the main opponent or opponents were and how many votes they got. Give the date of the election. State the political parties of the candidates. So this goes from A to S. S is the 19th letter of the alphabet, therefore there's 19 things to choose from. All you have to do is just choose any 3 of these to do and show them to your commander and probably your outpost. Okay, requirement 4. Identify at least 5 scriptures that depict the qualities of a good leader and make a list of the qualities described in them. So I'd like to introduce you to the concordance if you haven't already, or if you don't know about it already. It's basically a part in the back of the Bible or a separate book like Strong's Concordance, and you look up a name, a place, or a keyword, and it will direct you to specific scripture verses. So here are some keywords to consider. Lead, leader, serve, service, or servant, righteous, just, humility, meek, pride, selfish, in terms of what that could do to the leader and his effectiveness. Finally, requirement 5. Provide an oral or written report of at least 300 words or at least 3 minutes in length about your favorite president. Include the reasons for your choice and how they displayed good leadership qualities. So congratulations, you got a very good start on the President's Merit. The next step is to show your commander the notes, do the things for requirements 3, 4, and 5, and who knows, God knows, you might be on your way to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Alright, be blessed and keep up the good work.